in school here. You know, we don't use what we know. We still don't use a tenth of what we know. And one of the things we know is that psychological, mental processes are, you know, it may all be about the brain, to the neuroscientists. It may all be about the brain, but those things do affect our physical health very significantly. But more importantly, they affect the health of our community, and not just through behavior. It's not just that some people behave badly and so we have, you know, it's systemic. This stigma is why mental health and addictions does not get the funding that it should overall. So in the health system, it's about 4 to 5% of the health budget. The problem, whether you take 1 in 5 or you take a different measure, even 8 to 10% would make a huge difference in terms of what could be done in the field. And that doesn't really even begin to touch what I know a lot of you are concerned with, which is the health of communities. So when we talk about the relationship between physical and mental health not being well understood or not well accepted, would that be a better way to put it?
Yeah.
I think that's equally true about community health, that we talk about we do talk about physical health, you know, what's the water supply like? Do we have good sewage systems? Do we have all of those public health measures that we don't poison our kids? We don't, you know, those kinds of things. What I'd love to see is a kind of, like, I don't know if anybody's into gardening in a big way, but there's a thing called Communities in Bloom that the Landscape Association starts that has criteria. Why can't we have sort of a mental health in communities thing that's parallel, where communities would compete with one another to be the healthiest places to live, or the best places to live, you know? And how would we define, and your task would be to define what that would look like. So how would we define a healthy community? What are some of the kinds of things we want to see? Physical health measures we could define, but what are some of the other kinds of things about the kind of space people have to get together in, the kinds of people we have to animate that, the kinds of outlets for people to say what bothers them about what's going on in their communities, and good leadership, you know, those kinds of things would be kinds of issues that your council deals with, and how they deal with them or don't deal with them, and people that they don't include in important meetings, those kinds of things. Some of the things I've thought of anyway. I need somebody to work on this project.
Have you heard of the vital signs that the community foundations do?
No.
They take a measurement of a lot of some of those issues, actually, about everything that you can think of, and they get a grade between A and D.
And who pays attention to it?
Actually, it's the community. I don't know. Anybody? I think it's great. I think it's really good. Sometimes they ask for input from the community, and it's a survey, and then they usually have a town hall meeting to
Okay,
let
perfect.
you know about it. So it's
There you
similar
go.
to that. So yeah.
See? Been done.
I don't know where. Well, I think it's ongoing, and I don't know how many communities participate in it. I know one group did.
Oh,
So Toronto did.
okay.
Or start.
For a start. Yeah.
So when you graduated from the community psychology program, how did you see yourself changing the world, or what was the course of action that you wanted to commit yourself to?
Well, I thought I knew everything. I was a real come down to go and work for what was then the Canadian Association for the Mentally Retarded. But I had no idea what I was going to do with it. I thought, I probably knew more than they needed from me. So I was pretty arrogant. I had no idea what I needed to learn, but I learned a lot. I thought I had some basic skills that I could help groups understand how to get together, how to talk about what they wanted to do, help them devise some steps and those sorts of things. Those were the kinds of skills I had. I was focused pretty much on disabled people. That was my experience in the community psych program I was in place liaised with the local Kinsman Association and the Developmental Center and worked with them and did public education, so I had that as a working background, which is probably why I got the job. I had knowledge of people who had developmental disability and had worked with, you know, small kids as well as adults, and had an advocacy kind of focus. What they considered advocacy was parent groups. You know, they were primarily a parent-based organization, and those parent groups wanted to get together, were formed as an organization, but were transitioning to more of an advocacy role and less of a service provision role. So I understood kind of what both of those were. So,
could you comment a little more on something you said at the beginning of your presentation on the non-defensive combat?
non-defensive combat.
Fight non-defensive and consider this a problem for you.
Yeah. So I sit at a table with doctors, a number of doctors who are renowned in their field. You know, a nurse who's, you know, CAMH is the biggest in the country and has quite a reputation, so we get pretty good people. They're very smart. It's one of the greatest advantages. The problem is sitting at a table every week with very smart people who all have certain things that they want to get done, and being in a minority, you know, my part of the organization, although Peter said I have a very, very big portfolio, which is certainly true from my perspective, I have about 150 staff who are doing policy and education and health promotion, is that this is a part of a teaching hospital that nobody has any idea what to do with. Like, it's like, what do those people do over there is kind of the question. So if you feel like you're kind of a minority in the science faculty, you're not really a minority, but you're, you know, a little bit off the mainstream, that's my life every single day. What I'm doing is not hard, like, it's like, how does this fit in a hospital? And that has been more or less a fight. But I do have to advocate for that, the importance of that activity. I have to explain it, and sometimes I have to fend off a lot of incursion of, you know, why aren't you doing more for the doctors? And of course the doctors get paid more because that's just the way it is, and don't you understand, and so on. And it's hard for me to hold my own in that situation if I don't have all brain cells firing, because there's a lot of brain cells in the room that are firing. And they're sometimes firing against me. And if all I'm focused on is defending myself, it's not going to work. And I know that much. It doesn't always get me past it. So the more you can kind of focus on how you define the issue, keep the fight on the issue, say, you know, I'm learning a few things. I learn every day, and I've learned a few things from my CEO. And one of his favorite lines is, "That's a really good question." And I've learned to say that when people say, "Well, how can you do this?" You know, that's a really good question. And you know, we're not doing it nearly as well as we'd like to. And we don't have really good data on this. We are trying to collect information on what kind of impact we've made on this health system in, you know, Temiskaming. And we're not doing it nearly as well as we should, but we do know that, blah, 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 like, that's the way I should handle it. I know that up here, but that's not the way I feel when somebody says, well, the way we're going to balance our budget this year is we're going to cut them by 15%. Like, here we go again. So, I don't know, does that explain it?